Want a beer, Chief?
How about an ID?
An ID?
Cheers might be one of the most loved sitcoms in television history, but behind all the smiles, clinking glasses, and wonderful sense of humor lies something outrageously ridiculous. In this video, we will bring to the spotlight 20 unbelievably weird facts of Cheers that stayed hidden for decades. May I remind you that this is not your usual behind-the-scenes trivia, so take a seat, grab a drink, and get ready to say wow more than 10 times because these 20 facts are gonna blow your minds. Number 20. Carla was pregnant in real life during filming. A pregnant woman on set? Now that's weird. If you thought Carla looked extra fierce behind that bar, it must have been the hormones talking. Did you know that Rhea Perlman, the actress who played the sharp-tongued Carla, was pregnant during filming, and it wasn't once or twice, but during multiple seasons? The writers had to keep weaving pregnancies into her storyline until it almost felt like Carla was single-handedly repopulating Boston. Sometimes they tried to hide it with baggy clothes or trays of drinks. Other times they just said, "Yep, she's pregnant again, keep it moving." It became such a regular thing that even Carla's kids on the show gave up trying to count their new siblings. Between pouring drinks, throwing insults, and raising half a dozen children, Carla made being pregnant on screen look like part of the job. Imagine acting cranky when you're pregnant and being paid for it. Genius. If nothing else, Cheers made one thing clear. You don't need maternity leave when you've got punchlines, bar stools, and a boss who writes your baby bump into the script. Let's just hope the babies weren't born thinking Norm was their real dad. Next. Number 19. Coach's notes were actually real lines. If you watched the show in the early 80s, you'll agree that Coach was the sweetest and most confused bartender on television. But did you know that some of his funniest lines came from napkins and scraps of paper? Truth is, Nicholas Colasanto, who played Coach, struggled to memorize his lines, so he wrote them down and hid them all over the bar set, inside beer mugs, on coasters, even taped under the cash register. It was like a scavenger hunt for dialogue. When he paused on screen and looked down at a glass, you might have thought he was just being his usual absent-minded self. Nope, he was reading his next line. Sometimes he'd look at a beer mat like it owed him money, but really, it was just giving him his next line about Sam's love life. Somehow, it fit the character perfectly. Coach was supposed to be forgetful and slow, so reading lines off a bar napkin made him more believable. Interestingly, many viewers loved him because he was warm, honest, and had the best confused face in the business. And now that we know the secret, his scenes are even funnier. So the next time you rewatch Cheers, look closely when Coach stares at the counter. That could be the script talking back to him. But he nailed his role in the show, don't you agree? Next. Number 18. Frasier almost didn't get his spin-off. Frasier Crane, the psychiatrist, made you laugh with words you couldn't even spell. Believe it or not, the guy almost didn't get his show. After Cheers ended, producers were unsure if viewers wanted more of Frasier's fancy vocabulary and endless talking about feelings. Let's face it, he wasn't exactly the life of the party. He drank sherry, he read poetry, and he talked about Freud as if it were football. Not your average sitcom material, but somehow he won everyone over. Maybe it was the hair. Perhaps it was his unusual yet lovable relationship with his dad and dog. Either way, NBC gave him a chance, and with pleasure, he grabbed it and made the most of it. Surprisingly, Frasier became one of the most successful spin-offs in television history. All that from a character who almost didn't make it past the cutting room floor. Imagine missing out on all those years of Frasier yelling "Roz," or pretending to be a radio god while just being very lonely. It turns out people loved hearing smart people complain in expensive apartments, and even if you didn't understand half of what he said, it sounded smart enough to laugh at. Cheers gave us Frasier. Frasier gave us laughs. And for a guy who wasn't supposed to get a show, he sure made a lot of people feel better about their own families. Next. Number 17. The final episode was watched by over 80 million people. Let's take a moment to imagine 80 million people doing the same thing at once. No, not a flash mob or a power outage, just sitting quietly, watching the final episode of Cheers. When the show ended in 1993, the streets were quiet, bars were probably empty, and even babies were told to hush. It felt like a national holiday without the fireworks. Of course, the finale was that big. People who hadn't watched a single episode in years tuned in to say goodbye. Some brought tissues, others brought beer, but everyone brought their feelings. 80 million viewers turned a simple goodbye into television history. Think about it. That's more than the entire population of some countries. And what were they watching? A man in a bar who decided to stay with his true love. The bar. That's right. Sam chose beer and buddies over love. Strange but true. The final moments were emotional. There was no big explosion or alien invasion. Just a locked door and one last drink, and we all felt like part of the family. So yes, the show about a bar where nobody ever paid their tab ended with the whole country toasting in their living rooms, and that's the kind of power only Cheers had. Next. Number 16. Cheers' bathroom had a fan base. Now, let us talk about a part of Cheers you never saw but somehow everybody knew. Yes, the bathroom. There was no camera back there, no scenes, just sound effects and characters going in and out like it was the place to be. And guess what? Fans were obsessed with it. The Cheers bathroom became a legend. People wrote blog posts, created memes, and even requested a bathroom tour when visiting the bar's replica in Boston. You know you've made it when your fake bathroom has a fan club without having to argue or provide proof. Some viewers said they loved how mysterious it was. Others said they just liked knowing the characters were human enough to excuse themselves. Carla once came out of there threatening someone. Cliff used it to hide. Sam probably did mirror pep talks inside, but no one ever saw the inside. It could have been a broom closet for all we know. Still, that invisible bathroom did more work than most guest stars. It gave the characters a place to escape to. It gave viewers something to wonder about. And it made a whole generation giggle every time a toilet flushed in the background. Who would have thought a bathroom with no camera time could become one of the most talked about parts of a sitcom? I don't think so. Number 15. Ted Danson went to bartender school for the role. Yes, before he ever poured a drink on set, Ted Danson was getting schooled in the fine art of bartending. Surprised? The man behind Sam Malone didn't just roll up to the bar and start slinging beer like a pro. He enrolled in a bartending class. Now imagine Ted Danson in a crowded classroom, standing next to a bunch of people trying to make ends meet with tips, while he's just there to pretend on TV. That's what we call method acting, right? Danson later admitted he was terrible at it. His hands shook, he forgot drink recipes, and he confessed he would never survive an actual night shift. But that little training gave him enough confidence to fake it convincingly on screen. The result? One of the most believable and lovable bartenders in sitcom history. But here's the fun part. Despite all that effort, most of the drinks served in Cheers were either fake beer or just colored water. So all that learning how to pour the perfect pint? Kind of unnecessary. Still, Danson's dedication made Sam Malone feel like a guy who had been behind that bar for years. And that, friends, is what makes acting magical. One moment, you're failing at bartending class, and the next, you're America's favorite ex-baseball player turned bartender. So next time you see Sam sliding a glass across the counter like a boss, just remember, he was once a nervous student in a classroom and had to give his best, not for the grades, but for a role in a sitcom. Next. Number 14. Rhea Perlman's real-life husband joined the cast. Do you remember Carla, the fierce, sharp-tongued waitress, whose role was to sit behind the counter and effortlessly roast a customer while refilling their beer? That was Rhea Perlman, and she brought fire to Cheers from the very beginning. But what fans often forget is that her real-life husband, Danny DeVito, didn't just cheer her on from the couch. He joined the Cheers universe in a rather unexpected way. Now let's be clear, DeVito didn't walk in and start taking orders behind the bar. He appeared as a guest, not as a regular cast member. But his connection to the show went beyond cameos. He was already a big star from Taxi, and the couple's celebrity status gave the Cheers crew a serious star power boost behind the scenes. The dynamic between Perlman and DeVito was something to admire. They were this powerhouse comedy couple in real life, and you could feel it in Perlman's confidence on screen. They would even rehearse lines together at home, adding their unique flavor to the mix. While DeVito didn't officially become part of the show's bar staff, he was part of the Cheers family in spirit. So when Carla was tossing out insults or shutting down flirty customers, just know she probably got a few of those killer comebacks polished with help from her hubby. Now that's what we call a relationship with perks. If your partner helps you become even sassier at work, you should probably hold on to them. Number 13. The show recycled audience laughter from earlier episodes. Here's a secret straight from the tap. Not every laugh you heard on Cheers was fresh. That's right. Some of those chuckles and guffaws echoing through the bar came from earlier episodes. They didn't just recycle jokes, they recycled the actual laughter. It's not as lazy as it sounds. Filming in front of a live studio audience is tricky business. Sometimes a joke that was crushed in rehearsals fell flat on tape night. Other times, a great take got ruined by someone sneezing or laughing at the wrong line. What did the editors do? Their job was simple. They reached into their laughter vault and borrowed some premium giggles from past tapings. Think of it like Cheers had its loyal laugh crew. The audience from episode 3 might pop up laughing in episode 12. That guy who laughed like a donkey in season 2, he probably made it all the way to season 6 without even knowing. Of course, the actors still performed everything live, and plenty of the laughs were real and immediate. But in moments when things didn't quite land, those vintage laughs filled the silence and saved the punchline. So next time you watch an episode and hear the crowd go wild over a simple eyebrow raise from Norm, you might just be hearing ghosts of laughs past. Number 12. Woody thought his audition went terribly. When Woody Harrelson walked into his audition for Cheers, he didn't exactly float in with confidence. He left the room thinking he had blown it. Why? He thought he messed up his lines, didn't connect with the character, and generally came off like a guy who just wandered in off the street looking for free snacks. But here's the twist. The producers loved him. They thought he was perfect. His awkwardness, authentic, his clueless vibe, exactly what they needed. They were trying to replace Coach, and Woody's natural charm and lost puppy energy made him the perfect fit for the role of Woody Boyd, the lovable farm boy bartender. Harrelson's shock when he got the call was real. He had already told his friends the audition was a disaster and had started looking at other gigs, but Cheers took a chance on him, and that chance paid off big time. He brought a whole new flavor to the bar and quickly became a fan favorite. The lesson here? Sometimes what feels like your worst moment is your best. Woody's flop became famous, and his nerves became network gold. So if you ever leave an interview convinced you tanked it, just remember that Woody Harrelson thought the same, and later became one of the most beloved sitcom characters of the 80s. Number 11. Ted Danson's hair had a secret life. To many viewers, Sam Malone was the smooth, handsome, and always perfectly styled young man on the show. But there was one thing viewers didn't know while swooning over him. Ted Danson's hair was not all it seemed to be. That beautiful hair? It had a little help. Yes, folks, Sam Malone wore a hairpiece. Danson started losing his hair at a young age, and by the time Cheers rolled around, his natural hairline had taken an early retirement. However, producers felt that Sam needed to look like the kind of guy who could make women faint by saying hi, so they gave Danson a very discreet, very carefully styled hairpiece. The remarkable part is that most people had no idea. It wasn't until years later that the secret came out. During a guest appearance on Letterman, Danson whipped the piece off for laughs, and fans collectively gasped. People felt betrayed, amused, and weirdly impressed all at once. Behind the scenes, the wig became an integral part of his daily preparation. Hair team, glue, precision. It was like its own character. Sam Malone may have been a womanizer, but Ted Danson's hairpiece was the one getting all the screen time. So the next time you watch Cheers and admire Sam's perfect hair while he pours a cold one, just remember that there was a stylist somewhere backstage fighting the forces of gravity and time to keep that masterpiece in place. Next, number 10. Kelsey Grammer was only meant to appear for a few episodes. Originally, Kelsey Grammer's Frasier Crane was never supposed to stick around. He was introduced as a side distraction, a new love interest for Diane, just to shake things up. The plan? Keep him around for a few episodes, stir the pot, then kick him out like a bad ex. But something strange happened. Viewers liked him. A lot. Frasier, with his fancy words and confused snobbery, turned out to be TV gold. Audiences laughed, the writers leaned in, and the next thing you know, the guy meant to exit early became a permanent part of the Cheers family. What was supposed to be a short gig turned into a full-blown sitcom marriage. And if that's not wild enough, he didn't just survive Cheers. He spun right out of that bar and landed his iconic series Frasier, which ran for 11 seasons. 11! That's the same number of seasons Cheers had. Imagine showing up to work thinking you're just a guest, only to become the person everyone remembers accidentally. It's like walking into a party for a slice of pizza and being handed the microphone for karaoke night. Would you nail the presentation or just walk away? Guess that's on you then. Number 9. The set was intentionally built slightly off level. Ever walked into a place and felt something was a little off? It turns out that the Cheers bar set was purposely tilted. Yup, not straight. The designers built the set just slightly off level. Not enough to make you dizzy, but just enough to help the camera catch all the action perfectly. You might be thinking, why tilt a bar that already had enough characters falling over drunk? But the producers were thinking like visual wizards. By slightly adjusting the set, they gave the camera angles a more natural line of sight. That meant better close-ups, fewer awkward shadows, and a bar that somehow looked even more like the neighborhood spot you wish existed. What's funnier is that none of the actors ever tripped or mentioned it during filming. They walked those crooked floors like seasoned pirates on a ship. Norm probably thought it was just the beer. So while the audience was laughing at Woody mixing up orders or Cliff giving another nonsense fact, the set itself was playing its sneaky trick, a tiny tilt for a massive effect. Now, next time you rewatch an episode, just imagine all your favorite moments happening on a slant. Just make sure your head is in a straight position while imagining. Next. Number 8. The bar's phone number led to a real Boston bar. Here's a wild one. In the early seasons, Cheers had a phone number stuck up on the wall. Just a fun little background prop, right? Wrong. That number rang up at a real bar in Boston. Now imagine this. You're chilling in your hometown, diving, pouring a pint, when suddenly fans from across the country start calling and asking, "Is Sam there?" Or, of course, demanding to speak to Norm. That poor bartender must have aged 10 years every time the phone rang. The number they used led straight to the Bull and Finch pub, the real-life bar that inspired the Cheers set. Locals were already familiar with the joint, but after the show aired, it became a magnet for tourists. People wanted to sip beer and quote Cliff Clavin in the same booth he might have sat in, if he were real, of course. Eventually, the Bull and Finch leaned into the chaos. They renamed the place Cheers and welcomed the flood of visitors with open arms, and probably a lot of earplugs for the ringing phone. So yeah, what started as a tiny background detail ended up turning a real Boston bar into a pop culture landmark. All thanks to a prop guy who probably thought, hey, no one's gonna call this. Next. Number 7. Sam Malone was originally written as a footballer. Picture this. Sam Malone. Not as a baseball player, but as a former football star. Yes, the original plan was to make Sam a gridiron god, not a Red Sox relief pitcher. But there was just one small problem. Ted Danson didn't look like a football player. At all. The creators took one look at him and realized, this guy screams fastballs and curveballs, not touchdowns and helmet hits. So they called an audible and rewrote his entire backstory. Suddenly, Sam was a washed-up baseball hero with a bar and a drinking problem. Turns out that was the smartest switch in sitcom history. Baseball gave Sam a certain smooth swagger. He was charming, a little damaged, but with that lovable loser glow. And the baseball angle fit perfectly into the Boston vibe. After all, what's Boston without the Red Sox and a little heartbreak? Fans bought into the switch. Nobody ever doubted it. What if he had been a former football star? Would he have worn shoulder pads behind the counter? So yeah, sometimes the wrong face for a sport gives you the perfect guy for the role. And thanks to Ted's non-football build, we got the Sam Malone we all know and love. Pitcher, bartender, and heartbreaker. Next, the snobby intellectual who somehow made a bar stool feel like a lecture hall. She was brilliant, dramatic, and wildly funny. And just when fans were getting into her will they won't they thing with Sam, Shelley decided to peace out. She left the show after the 5th season. Why? She wanted to be a movie star. She was ready to trade the bar for the big screen. And she didn't want to get typecast as the uptight blonde forever. To be fair, she did have some success. Due to the success of Outrageous Fortune, she even co-starred with Tom Hanks in The Money Pit. But nothing ever quite hit like Cheers. Her departure rocked the show. Writers scrambled, viewers screamed at their TVs, and Sam looked emotionally wrecked. Still, Cheers managed to power through without her, introducing new characters and keeping the laughs rolling. But for many, Diane's exit marked the end of an era. Shelley did come back for the finale though, and trust me, It was like walking into a gathering where everyone already knows your name. Next. Number 5. The pilot ranked dead last in the ratings. It's almost impossible to imagine today, but the pilot episode of Cheers aired to almost no applause. When the very first episode premiered on September 30th, 1982, it ranked dead last in Nielsen ratings. Out of 77 shows that week, it came in 77th. That's not just a flop, that's a belly flop with a broken diving board. Most shows would have been yanked faster than a bar stool in a bar brawl. But here's where it gets interesting. NBC didn't give up on Cheers. The network believed in the characters, the script, and the idea that people wanted to go where everybody knows their name, so they kept airing it, hoping viewers would catch on. Eventually they did. Cheers went from loser to legend, finishing as one of the most watched and most loved sitcoms in TV history. What does this tell us? Maybe never judge a show by its pilot. If NBC had pulled the plug, we'd never have had Norm's one-liners, Sam's hair, or Carla's sarcasm. It's the underdog story that every sitcom wishes it had. And just think, if things had gone the way the numbers said, this entire presentation wouldn't exist. The bar that nobody watched became the bar everyone loved. That's one twist nobody saw coming. Number 4. Norm's name was almost completely different. Imagine the Cheers bar without the booming shout of Norm as he walks through the door. Weird, right? Now picture that same moment, but the entire bar yells George or Cliff, or worse, nothing at all. Because in the early drafts of the show, the man we all know as Norm Peterson wasn't even a fully formed character. The writers had originally tossed around a few names, including George, and at one point, he was simply referred to as the bar regular. No name, no backstory, just a guy who said stuff and drank a lot of beer. Then along came George Wendt. He showed up at the audition and read the part with so much effortless charm that the writers immediately scrapped their original ideas. It was like lightning striking the bar counter. They looked at each other and said, "This guy is the bar regular. He's not just some background filler, he's Norm." From that moment on, Norm Peterson was born. And once the writers gave him a name, they gave him everything else. A wife named Vera who never shows her face. A job that changes more often than his drink order. And most importantly, a legendary entrance that would become one of the most repeated gags in television history. Every time Norm walked into the bar, everyone shouted his name like he was the Pope walking into Fenway Park. It never got old, and let's not forget his quotes. Norm became the show's resident philosopher, turning every beer into a moment of existential wisdom. "It's not that I'm afraid to die," he once said. "I just don't want to be there when it happens." Or, "Women, can't live with them. Pass the beer nuts." If his name had stayed George, we'd probably have missed out on the magic. Norm just sounds like the kind of guy who's always at the bar, knows everyone's business, and has advice no one asked for but everyone needed. Norm was familiar. Norm was comforting. Norm was, well, Norm. So next time you hear someone walk into a room and the crowd shouts their name, you can thank George Wendt and the writers who knew better than to stick with a bland placeholder. Because if Cheers had gone with their first draft, we might never have gotten the man who turned sitting on a bar stool into an art form. Number 3. The certain color ban. When you think of a cozy Boston bar filled with laughter, beer mugs, and lovable misfits, you probably do not think of a strict color ban. But yes, Cheers had one, and it was more than just a weird creative decision. This odd little fact had everything to do with TV production tricks, set design secrets, and a splash of superstition. Ready to sip this one slowly like a cold draft? Let's dive in. Back in the 1980s, production crews were obsessed with color harmony, not just for aesthetic reasons, but also for how things appeared on a television screen. The lighting and camera technology of the time was not as forgiving as it is today. Certain colors, especially bright reds, harsh whites, and dark blacks, caused all sorts of filming problems. Red would often appear blurry or bleed on screen. Whites could bounce too much light, and blacks could look too flat. These colors would mess with the vibe of a warm and welcoming bar. So, Cheers adopted what's jokingly referred to as the certain color ban. Wardrobe, set designers, and even the actors had to be mindful of what showed up in a scene. Costume designers avoided specific shades, especially pure white or fiery red. Even beer labels and props were toned down. If you ever wondered why Norm is always in muted colors, or why the walls have a mellow tone instead of being bright and shiny, This is the reason. There were also psychological reasons for the ban. Producers believed that too many sharp or dramatic colors might distract viewers from the characters. The tone of Cheers was warm, friendly, and slightly sentimental. Jarring colors didn't belong in a place where everyone knew your name. The bar was not just a bar, it was a second home, and like any cozy home, it needed comforting colors. Interestingly, this ban even extended to the background extras. If you were lucky enough to be an extra sipping pretend beer in the background, you might have been told to remove a jacket or change your shirt if it was the wrong color. The directors were serious about the ban and often said that the wrong shade could steal focus away from the main action, even if it was barely noticeable to viewers at home. Fans later noticed that when Shelley Long's Diane wore light pink or lilac, she seemed to pop on screen almost too much. In later seasons, her wardrobe was dialed down to reflect a calmer character arc, so even character development followed the rules of the ban. Now, here is something really strange. In one episode, a background actor accidentally wore a bright red jacket, and the scene had to be reshot. It cost the studio thousands. That color ban wasn't just a guideline, it was a commandment. So next time you rewatch Cheers and marvel at how warm and perfect everything looks, remember it is not by accident. Every shade, every thread, and every beer label passed the great color committee of Cheers. Makes you wonder, do you think modern shows care this much about every pixel you see on screen? Or was Cheers simply a product of a time when the little things mattered more? Number 2. The bar had real beer in Season 1. Real beer on set? Sounds like a party, right? During the first season of Cheers, the producers decided to use actual beer for filming, not root beer, not apple juice, the real frothy, bubbly thing. Imagine being a struggling actor and being told your job includes sipping free beer all day. Sounds like the dream job until reality hits. It turns out that beer under hot studio lights smells like a frat house on Sunday morning. And it doesn't just smell bad, it gets warm, flat, and nasty. Imagine trying to act while holding your breath. So, after a few too many smelly episodes and some slurred lines, the team switched to non-alcoholic substitutes. But for that short, magical window, the bar was flowing with the real stuff. Authenticity was the goal, but freshness was sacrificed in the process. Now, when you re-watch Season 1, you can feel a little smug. You know the secret. Those drinks are real. Those burps might not be scripted. And those smiles? Maybe just a little tipsy. It's another example of how Cheers wasn't afraid to try something wild to make things feel real. Even if it meant a slightly boozy workplace, the lengths they went to give us a believable bar are worth raising a glass to. Number 1. The cast never clinked glasses in a toast. In a show about a bar where people drink all day and night, you'd expect a lot of glass clinking. But in Cheers, you never see the cast tap their mugs together in a toast. Not once. No cheers in Cheers. It sounds like a setup for a joke, but it's true. Why didn't they? Some say it was superstition. Others say it was a creative decision to avoid cliches. The producers wanted the bar to feel real but not corny. Glass clinking felt too on the nose. Or maybe it was just to avoid the audio nightmare of constantly miking the clinks. Whatever the reason, the choice worked. The show didn't need to have its characters clink glasses to bond. The connections were deeper than toasts. Norm's arrival was a celebration. Sam's flirtation was a ritual. Carla's comebacks were applause-worthy. They didn't need to spell it out with a clink. So here's the big question. Why name the show Cheers if no one ever says cheers? Maybe the real toast was in the laughter, the loyalty and the love that kept fans tuning in every week. But did you ever notice the missing clinks? Tell us in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and entertaining content. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.